There's a particular kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from working too hard. It comes from earning more than you ever thought you would, and still feeling like it isn't enough. You get the raise. You move into the bigger place. You upgrade the car or the holidays or the groceries you buy without checking the price. And for a moment, maybe a week, maybe a month, there's a feeling of relief. A quiet sense that you've arrived somewhere. That the pressure will ease now, but it doesn't ease. It shifts. And after a while, you stop questioning why. I've been thinking about this for a long time, not just as a money problem, but as a psychological one. Because the people who live this way aren't reckless, they aren't stupid. A lot of them are disciplined, hardworking, genuinely careful with their decisions, and yet they arrive at the same place over and over again. More income, same anxiety, the same vague, nagging feeling that they're just behind. That feeling has a name, and understanding it changes something. There's a concept in behavioral psychology called the hedonic treadmill. The basic idea is simple enough. Human beings are remarkably good at adapting to new circumstances. When something good happens, we feel it. We genuinely feel it. But over time, that new thing becomes the baseline. The excitement fades, the relief dissolves, and what once felt like abundance starts to feel like just normal. The problem isn't ingratitude. It isn't laziness or weakness. It's biology. We evolved to notice change, not permanence. Our nervous systems are wired to respond to movement, not stillness, which means that the moment something good stops being new, it stops registering as good at all, and so we reach for the next thing. Not because we're greedy, because we're human. But here's where it gets strange. Because understanding the treadmill is one thing, noticing that you're on it is something else entirely. Most people who live in this cycle never step back far enough to see the whole pattern. They just live inside it. They earn more, spend more, feel momentarily better, and then find themselves anxious again a few months later. And each time the anxiety returns, the most logical explanation seems to be that they simply don't earn enough yet, that the number is just slightly too small, that if it were a bit bigger, this time it would finally hold. And so the number gets bigger. And it doesn't hold. There's something almost invisible happening underneath all of this, something that goes deeper than lifestyle inflation, though that's definitely part of it. It's the way we build our identity around a standard of living before we've actually thought about what we want that life to feel like. Think about the ordinary moments in a week. The Woolworths run where you don't look at prices anymore because you've decided you're past that. The lunch you expense because it feels appropriate to your position now. The suburb you moved into because it matched the version of yourself you were becoming. None of these are dramatic decisions. They're quiet ones, incremental, and each one, on its own, is entirely reasonable. But together, they construct a floor, a minimum standard below which retreat now feels like failure, like going backwards. And that floor is almost always built faster than the income supporting it. This is where lifestyle inflation becomes something more than a budgeting problem. It becomes a psychological trap, because the moment your spending rises to meet your income, you've eliminated your margin. And when there's no margin, there's no safety. And when there's no safety, even a genuinely good income produces genuine anxiety. That sounds small. It isn't, because the anxiety doesn't feel like a spending problem. It feels like an earning problem. It feels like the solution is still ahead of you, just slightly out of reach, and so you keep reaching. If these kinds of conversations make you feel a little less alone in all of this, you're welcome to stay around. A lot of people come to this channel looking for money strategies. I think most of us are really looking for something quieter than that. There's another layer to this, and it's the one most people don't want to look at directly. It involves the people around us. We are social animals in the most literal sense. Our sense of where we stand has never been measured in absolute terms. It's always been relative, always been about the comparison. And for most of human history, that comparison was limited. You compared yourself to the people in your street, your village, the 50 or so people you actually knew. Now, you compare yourself to everyone. The person at work who just got back from Japan, the family on Instagram with the renovated kitchen and the kids in private school, the friend group where somehow everyone seems to be buying property or starting businesses or taking long service leave to travel. You're not measuring your life against a small community anymore. You're measuring it against a curated highlight reel of thousands of people simultaneously. And the maths of that comparison is brutal. Because there will always be someone ahead of you in one dimension or another. Always someone with a nicer car or a bigger house or a more impressive job title. And if your sense of financial security depends on winning that comparison, you never will. Not permanently. There's always another level above. This is what psychologists call relative deprivation. The feeling of lacking something. Not because you objectively don't have enough, but because someone nearby has more. And what makes it insidious is that it's completely invisible. It doesn't announce itself as envy. It announces itself as ambition, as drive, as the reasonable feeling that you should be doing better. Most people never notice this part. They just feel the pressure and assume it's telling them something true about their circumstances. They don't stop to ask whether the pressure itself is the distortion. Here's a thing I've noticed. The people who seem most psychologically settled about money aren't necessarily the ones earning the most. They're the ones who've stopped measuring their financial life in comparison to someone else's. Quietly, privately, they've defined what enough looks like for them. Not what enough looks like according to the suburb they live in. Not what enough looks like based on what their colleagues have. Their own enough. And that definition becomes an anchor. Without that anchor, every raise just raises the water level. You're still treading. But this is harder than it sounds. Because we live in a culture that profits from the feeling of not enough. Every product being sold to us depends at some level on our dissatisfaction with what we already have. Every upgrade, every premium tier, every aspirational ad is speaking directly to the part of our brain that believes the next thing will finally settle the feeling. And that part of our brain is always listening, and after a while, you stop questioning it. There's a version of this that I think is particularly common in Australia right now. It's the pressure that comes from watching housing. From watching a generation of people do the maths and realize that the traditional milestones, the home, the stability, the sense of arrival, are priced out of reach in a way that feels genuinely unfair. And they are, in many cases, genuinely unfair. But what happens then is interesting. Because when one marker of arrival disappears, the spending doesn't contract. It redirects. The money that might have been saved flows instead toward experiences, toward lifestyle, toward the things that feel like compensation for the thing that was taken away, which is understandable, deeply understandable. But it can lock people into a cycle that looks like abundance and feels like running. The thing about the treadmill is that speed doesn't help. You can work harder, earn more, optimize more aggressively, and if the floor rises with you, the outcome is the same. More movement, same distance from the edge. What actually changes the feeling isn't acceleration. It's creating a gap between what you earn and what your life requires to function. Not a dramatic gap, not austerity, just breathing room, margin. The knowledge that if something went wrong this month or this year, you wouldn't immediately be in crisis. That gap does something to the nervous system that income alone can't do. It creates the subjective experience of enough. Not because the number is bigger, because the distance between where you are and the edge is wider. And paradoxically, the people who build that gap often do it not by earning dramatically more, but by being thoughtful about where their floor is, by choosing at some point not to upgrade, not because they can't, but because they've noticed that the upgrade doesn't stay satisfying for long, and the margin it costs is worth more than the feeling. That's a genuinely counterintuitive thing to sit with. In a culture that reads restraint as failure and spending as success, Choosing a smaller floor can feel like losing. But the people who do it quietly often describe it as the first time money started to feel like something other than a problem. Maybe that's the strange part. The freedom doesn't come from having everything. It comes from needing less of it. And I don't mean that in a deprivation sense. I mean it in the sense that when your baseline is calibrated to something you can genuinely maintain, the anxiety loses its grip. Not all at once, not completely, but enough that you can breathe differently. There's a line between simplicity and scarcity that I think gets blurred a lot in these conversations. Choosing a quieter life isn't the same as a constrained one. Plenty can be small in scale and still feel full. A good coffee on a Tuesday morning. A long walk somewhere green. A week off that doesn't require a 15-hour flight to justify. These things aren't consolation prizes. They're just a different relationship with what enough means. And I think a lot of people are starting to feel their way toward this, quietly. Not because they've read the right book or followed the right system, but because they've run the other strategy long enough to feel its limits. Because they've had the raise and felt the brief relief and watched the anxiety return. Because at some point the pattern becomes visible, and once it's visible, you can choose differently. Not everyone does. The treadmill is genuinely comfortable in a strange way. It gives you something to run toward. It provides momentum that can feel like purpose. And slowing down requires sitting with questions that moving fast lets you avoid. Questions about what you actually want. What would actually be enough. What you're really trying to feel. Those aren't comfortable questions, but they're the ones underneath all of this. The psychology of never feeling rich regardless of how much you earn is really the psychology of a self that hasn't yet defined what it's working toward. When the destination is always ahead of you, every milestone just becomes a new starting line, and the earning continues, and the spending adjusts, and the feeling stays the same. The way out isn't a bigger number, it's a clearer picture of what the number is for, and maybe that's worth sitting with tonight. Not as a problem to solve immediately, just as a question to hold. What would enough actually feel like, if you let yourself define it? If this kind of slower conversation about money helps quiet the noise a bit, you'll probably find the other videos here do something similar. There's no rush. They'll be here.